Good morning, Lead New Jersey, and welcome to our annual Diversity and Inclusion Seminar. I've titled this seminar, E Pluribus Unum, out of many, one, which you may know is a term put on our coins, but not always noticed. It is a truism to say, but today we're going to come to appreciate that we are a nation of nations. Our backgrounds, creeds, ethnicity, social origins literally span the globe. Whether we came yesterday or we came centuries ago, we are one people. And we are a people defined not by any common ancestry. We are unique in that we are one people because of the ideas we adhere to, the ideals we ascribe for ourselves, the laws that are human attempts with their foibles to embody those ideals. The idea was to come to this land and help shape it.
What you heard about me, please delete it from your brain. The past is gone, we like to go for tomorrow. Maybe some of us, as Americans, have big hope to say God, because we are in the house of God. The church, synagogue, mosque, Sikh, temple, any place. Maybe you have big hope to say tomorrow, God help me to be a better person, or maybe tomorrow is going to be more bright than yesterday. Or some of us will see too much darkness for tomorrow. What are we supposed to do? For myself, I will never ever look. Can I borrow either this or this? Which one I can? Let me take this. Yes. Sure. I will get back. I wash my hands before I.
No worries. I understand.
I will never ever look for the empty part of this bottle of water. All the time I look for what? The full one, because I need a drop of water. But if everything in front of me, I look, negative, all my life will be run as what? I don't like to do that. Second thing, God said in his book, don't believe the person who swear too much. By God, don't do that. But I can tell you something, it's affected my life. As a human being, no other part of the entire world, call it Google Earth, you know that, yes?
Yeah.
If you Google the entire world, there is no other path better than to be in United States of America.
Sarah and Hisham, can you come on up? So tell us a little bit about where we are, what we can experience, and then please take us next door. Thank you.
Sure. So, good morning. I am Sarah Slaney Shibley. I am Imam Shibley's daughter-in-law. So I'm married to a second son, Muhammad, and he'll be my father-in-law, as Mark said, around lunchtime. This is the Islamic Society of Central Jersey. It's been here for almost 40 years. In terms of conversion, all you do is you stand in front of the masjid, the mosque, the community, And there's a line that you say, one single line. It's called a shahada, which is like a declaration. And that's it.
But I could see the change when I started adopting the religion and taking it more seriously. Put on the beard, and I was here at the mosque 5 times a day, and life was changing. I could see also as my practices changed in how I dealt with people. For example, at Dodge, as Richard knows, I don't shake hands with females, but that's because it is a religious issue for me, not out of disrespect. So just the fact that I have to go through that, you know what I mean? And just to kind of to have to explain to people at times that I don't do that for religious reasons, as do some Orthodox Jews and other people. It just takes a lot of time to build that level of understanding. But I found that since 9/11, that the best thing I think for a lot of minority groups is not to pretend not to be who you are.
So Sikhism is actually one of the youngest world religions. It's about 500 years old. It was started in the northern region of India, in Punjab. Punjab is actually a divided state right now. Half is in Pakistan and half is in India. But the majority of Sikhs live in India. It was started by a man named Guru Nanak, and he preached about the oneness of God and the oneness of humanity. It was followed, subsequent to Guru Nanak, we had 10 gurus, and then it culminated in writing all the scriptures in a book called the Guru Granth Sahib, which is what we use when we worship. So if you go to a Sikh temple, you'll see people reading from the Guru Granth Sahib. It's how we pray. Most of the writings in the Guru Granth Sahib are poems, and they're set to music, and they're talking about devotion to God and coming together with the Creator. So Sikhism is a monotheistic religion as well. It's not necessarily the same concept of God as in some of the other religions, but we believe God is in everywhere and in everything, and God is the creator. We also, another aspect of Sikhism is we believe in the freedom of religion. So in some ways it kind of mirrors some of the American values as well. In the Guru Granth Sahib, there's actually writings from Hindu saints, and from Muslim saints at the time. So it's actually sort of embedded in the Guru Granth Sahib. The majority is obviously writings from our gurus.
Yeah, and that's part of, I think, what's caused the Sikh faith to be not so well known, because we actually are, and we'll probably get to it, it's probably on your list and stuff, but we're actually the 5th largest religion in the world. There's more Sikhs in the world than actually Judaism. So we're a substantial religion, one of the major religions in the world, but part of the reason is because we believe other religions are just another path to God, we don't actually preach our faith. We don't go out there trying to convert you to our faith, partially because we don't believe any other faith is wrong.
So some of the issues that Sikhs have faced, obviously we have a very visible identity. We've been targets of hate crimes. There's been issues around bullying, employment discrimination. What else?
Yeah, going through that list.
Going
Pretty
through
much
the
anything
list.
you can think of that would be identifiable there was a misconception after 9/11 of tying the turban to a terrorist. Just straightforward. None of the bombers on any of the planes wore turban. They were all clean cut, but based on the way the media treated the turban, looking at Osama bin Laden, he had a turban on, and his wasn't. His isn't specifically for religious purposes like a Sikh wears his. But they tied the Taliban to turbans to Sikhs, and so from that point onwards, where Sikhs were a strong part of the community, we didn't feel ostracized. We immediately started dealing with the effects of it.
The media doesn't help because there's not any statement that says you shouldn't be attacking anybody.
Yes.
Right? I mean, whether the presumption is that they are a Muslim or not.
Oh, completely.
Right.
Yeah.
So I always wait for somebody in the media to say, don't attack anyone.
Yeah.
Right? Like don't
And I think
this is wrong. And unfortunately, because there is not that language, we end up with New Zealand and other, things where there is a seeming, okayness in society where if you are a member of like a community or a religion or a culture that has done wrong, you can be wrong.
And we are going to share a little bit about our journeys, about what inclusion means to us, about what got us here in our careers and in our lives. So, does anyone want to give an anecdote of such a moment? And not just tell us about that as a historical moment, but what would you have wanted to see? What would you have wanted to say at that moment? To not just, in the minimal sense, gain acceptance, but to kind of change the dialogue and the premise behind it.
So actually, I'll give you a story that it's not pejorative though. I think that was a pejoratively focused question. It was a surprising learning experience for me. So I started in politics by complete accident. I was a student at the College of New Jersey. I started as a biology major. It turned out I was really terrible at that. So I changed my major 4 times while I was there. And the last time I became a political science major out of sheer I need to graduate-ness. And I needed to do an internship. So in the political science department, there was an ad for an intern for an assemblyman. No idea what an assemblyman was, literally. And called, got the job, figured it out quickly. Within 6 months, he asked me to be his deputy chief of staff. I'm 18 years old. Well, actually, by this point, I was 20. 20, we'll call it 20. So he asked me to be his deputy chief of staff, and I'm still in school. And he says, and I said, I gotta tell you something. I said, I don't know if you want to do this. I was like, what are you talking about? I said, I don't think this will be good for you. I said, I'm gay. And he said, so? Which was the perfect response and a lesson for me. So my point was that, you know, some would say that maybe I'm stereotypically lesbian, but whatever. But I'm not black, I'm not Latino. But my experience was a personal inside thing, right? Like, and I had that thing that I could theoretically hide, but still felt weird about it, and still said, like, I gotta tell him, like, this could be bad for him. Where I think that that's also different, because as most of the folks just reflected, like, y'all can't hide that, like, and so diversity is important in a lot of different ways.
So I'll respond to that by saying I can go back to, started out in the union and got into the first line of supervision. So that window in my career from about 10 years to getting close to 25 years was the combination of trying to move up the ladder from supervision into lower management, into upper management. And also, right, lasted old school. Also trying to get to that point where it's safe, where you're bulletproof, and they can't hurt you, right? Get to that 25-year mark, right? So in that window, there were a number of times when I wish that I was more comfortable at that time being the only African American in the room, and a conversation may come up about someone, about who should we advance, or someone who is not doing well, and knowing that if the conversation came up with someone that was African American, all eyes were going to turn to me to kind of respond to, right? So what I did at the time, in those years of what I'll call trying to make it, I didn't necessarily comment. So looking back, I wish the world was such, I wish public service was such, I wish I didn't have to have the fear of no longer being on that successful track, because I responded with something that for them may have been stereotypical told them what they expected.
So I would add another factor to the where you started with sort of convincing others that you're, you know, not dangerous or whatever that might be because of what you represent culturally. I would add also not relevant, right? I grew up with a single mom, and 32 Green Street, which is where the welfare office in Newark was like, you know, very familiar to me from the 4th grade up, and I was her interpreter. She didn't speak English, and at that time, there were primarily non-Latino social workers in the welfare office, and I remember spending lots of times where we had to go there, or she needed to go to that office and to get whatever service or show whatever paperwork or get audited, whatever the case might have been. I didn't understand then in the 4th grade what all of that was. All I knew was that I would have to interpret for her because we were in this world where the person with the authority really was not feeling or not representing my mom, right, and who we were, certainly by language and so many other things. And what kept coming through was that, you know, there's this sense of non-relevance because you live in poverty, because you're on welfare, or whatever the case might be. And so that kind of colored my whole world around this, you know, dichotomy around whether you're relevant or not, given economics, as well as language, as well as color, as well as gender.
And I remember getting a wonderful call from Alan Rosenthal, bless his soul. He was the director of the program at the time, and a leading scholar on government, and was the one that negotiated between the Republicans and the Democrats on redistricting the last time 10 years ago or so. And he calls me and he says, I'd like to offer you a full fellowship to go to Eagleton Institute. A couple of weeks pass and I get a letter of rejection. And so I call Alan and I said, Alan, I got a letter of rejection. He goes, what do you mean? And at that time there were faxes, and I was like, he says, fax it to me. I was like, I fax it to him. And so he calls me back and he says, Jeffrey, this is what I want you to do. This is the name of the person you got to call. This is the political science graduate school committee at Rutgers that you need to call, make an appointment, and tell them the reason why you're making the appointment is you want to understand why you were rejected. I make the call, make the appointment, and I said, I need to understand why was I declined when Eagleton Institute said to me, you are being accepted with a full fellowship. And he looked at me and he said this, and this is the moment that I froze, and he says, we already have one of you in the program. And I was like, what? And he says, we already have one of you in the program. And at that moment I was frozen. I didn't, you know, it was my first direct experience with somebody verbalizing it to me. I had a lot of experiences where you kind of sense it and you pick up on it, but nothing were so overt, and somebody just says to me, we already have one of you. All I could say is, thank you, letting me know. I got up, I walked out, I called Alan. At that time, I was having to also work part-time for Dick Nurse, who is the VP of Diversity for Rutgers, and I told him. And I also told Gloria Bonilla Santiago. So I started to tell people, and all I know is that within 3 weeks after that, I get a letter of acceptance.
It feels like every morning we wake up to new horrors caused by hate and persistent othering. So 50 people killed while praying at the Al-Noor Mosque in Linwood, at the Al-Noor Mosque and the Linwood Mosque in Christchurch, New Zealand. 11 people killed while praying at the Tree of Life Synagogue in Pittsburgh. A 17% increase in hate crime reported numbers to the FBI across the country between 2016 and 2017. That was the third consecutive year of an increase in the number of hate crimes, and it was the largest individual spike since right after September 11th, when there was a large spike in hate crimes against Muslim Americans. And the reported spike in New Jersey was even greater, where there were 495 hate crime incidents reported to the FBI in 2017, and that was a 76% increase over 2016. That doesn't mean that New Jersey had, and that was the fourth largest number across the country. That doesn't actually mean that New Jersey has more hate crimes that happen than in 46 other states. It's all just about reported data, so what is reported to the FBI. Many localities don't actually report any hate crimes data to the FBI. So the city of Miami, for example, reported 0 hate crimes for 2017, and the state of Mississippi reported 1. And that's not because there are no hate crimes that are occurring in those places. It's about how much are reported to the FBI. But even if it is that in New Jersey we are getting better at increasing reporting, I think that it is difficult to disagree with the fact that it seems like a wave of hate has been unleashed in the past several years, and that things that didn't used to seem possible or acceptable to see in public are now happening. So in New Jersey, just in the past year, reports of swastikas and racist graffiti found scrawled on school bathroom stalls, racist and homophobic slurs etched onto plaques near a high school baseball field, nooses found hanging in people's offices, words of hate and beer cans hurled at Jews walking to synagogue. And this seems really like an onslaught of attack on individuals because of what they look like, how they worship, or who they love. And then on the other end of the coin, we have the federal government really stepping back from what had been a major role in civil rights enforcement. And so every state has civil rights laws that it enforces, but the federal government also has very strong civil rights laws that in the past had been a huge priority for enforcement and seems to no longer be that same kind of priority.
This book, okay, is the culmination of 10 years of research and 3 years worth of writing. It's not like one day we decided to wake up and say, oh, let's write a book. It all began because we were faced with a question that we received from a man from West Amwell Township, was really not too far from here, and he called Elaine's house and said, listen, I don't know whether I have the right people, but they're getting ready to desecrate what I know to be a slave cemetery on private property, and I need to stop it. And I don't know whether you can point me in the right direction, whether you people are the right folks to talk to, but something has to be done. So from that question, we kind of galvanized, and we went out there and we said, we're going to have to see about this, because two middle-aged black women literally coming out of our houses and taking this on. So when we got there, all kinds of things happened and kind of fell into place, meaning like even the next door neighbor who was watching us, we parked in his driveway, he came out with a piece of paper and said, you might want this. It was actually a Xerox of the will of the patriarch from the land back in the 1800s, was saying he wanted that land to always stay as a cemetery. So, all these things were just falling into place. Questioning, who did we have in our cemetery? We were trustees of the Stoutsburg Cemetery for over 30 years. Just taking care of it, going about our business, only a handful of us making sure that the cemetery was maintained and operated. And we said, you know what? We never once thought about who is buried in Stoutsburg, which we know to be at least over 200 years old. So that was the beginning of our research which ended up in this book.
So when I was asked in 1990 to join the Historical Society of Princeton, and I was like a fly on the wall because I was the only black there for several years. And there was another director who said, there is ethnic history in Princeton. And we did the history of the Italian Americans because Italians lived in our community. We were a segregated community. And then we did the history of African Americans in Princeton. And after we did the exhibit, I said, we can't stop here. So that's when I started a walking tour. And I trained people who at that time were older than I. So since 1997, I have been doing this tour on my own. So I started with the tour, and then I said, we can't stop here. So after the tour, I was on the Historic Preservation Commission, and I said, our district needs to be an historic district. So I got a group of people together, and we were called the Clubhouse. We met at my house almost every week for a year. And we met with the council, we met with the, several people. And there were people in Princeton who didn't want us to be a historic community. Why? Because they wanted to do things with their houses that you can't do if it's historic. We did become the 20th Historic District, and yesterday was 3 years. And I forgot to tell everybody, please celebrate our 3rd year. Yeah. So we're now the 20th Historic District in Princeton.
One of the things that I wanted to dive into, we touched on earlier this morning in one of the panels, but just the increase that we've seen in the state of New Jersey in bias incidents that have been reported. Something that she didn't touch on. So the FBI each year releases their incident reports for each state. They are historically always lower than what the state actually reports because it's based on the way in which they see bias incidences and hate crimes, and that they are defined at the federal level and at the state level. So for 2016, there were about 200 and something reported at the federal and 300 something reported at the state. So we haven't received yet 2018's numbers, but I would guess that they're going to be higher than what has been reported so far by the FBI.
Just for your understanding, the reporting mechanism that's in place today federally, it's the Hate Crimes Reporting Act, which is a mandate, but it's completely voluntary for the local law enforcement agencies to report to the FBI. Whether or not they choose to do that or not is a problem. In New Jersey, we went from a reporting level of 13% in 2016 to a reporting level of 30% in 2017. We don't have the numbers yet for 2018, but there's a new system, a new IT system in place that should improve that. However, that reflects that there needs to be improvement in training of law enforcement to be able to recognize when a hate crime occurs or a bias incident occurs. But also reflects the fact that there are many instances, given immigration status, fear of not being understood, many other fears that prompt communities not to want to report hate crimes when they occur.